Hi, it's Lynn again. This video is about absolute value equations. Now I have another video that's going to be about absolute value inequalities. These are equations, meaning they have equal signs. Now what do we know about absolute value? Absolute value means, so for instance, if we have the absolute value of -2, we know that anything in here will be positive, so it would be 2. The same thing as if we have the absolute value of 2 is 2. So we know that anything inside the absolute value could be positive or negative, and that's sort of the basis of solving these equations. So right now we have an absolute value of 6 plus 2n equaling 4. All right, so now I have a story about absolute values. But this is sort of a silly story, but anyway, I think of absolute values as being castle walls. And you cannot let down the castle walls until it's safe. So you don't want to let down the drawbridge like this until there's no enemies around. So over here, this would be considered an enemy, so you would have to move that to the other side first. So over here, this now is safe, so we can let down the castle walls. And I let down one this way, and this will be my positive answer, because remember we can have a positive answer and a negative answer. And this way, it'll be my negative answer. So I'm going to set up two different equalities. So it's going to be, the positive one is just 6 plus 2n equals 4. And then this is going to be an or, because these don't overlap. These are just points because they're equal. And then we'd have 6 plus 2n would equal -4. And so now we solve each one of these. So we're going to subtract 6, so we have 2n equals -2, divide by -2, divide by -2, so n equals 1. Now notice, because it's an equal sign, we don't need to worry about flipping the sign over, because an equal sign is the same either way. Then we do this one, it's a -4 over here, so when we subtract 6, we're going to get a -10. So we have 2n equals -10, divide by 2. So we get n equals -5. So that means there's two answers, 1 or -5. And so those would be our two answers for this. So when we have absolute values, we're always going to get two answers. Sometimes they could be the same answer, but usually they're going to be two different answers. Then I'm going to talk about my castle walls over here and what happens. So we have this 5 would be considered an enemy for that castle. So we can't let down the castle walls and put them into positive and negative right now, because that 5 is there. So what we need to do is subtract the 5 from both sides. So we get absolute value of x minus 3 over 2 equals 3. Now it's safe, so we can go in the positive direction and the negative direction. So we're going to have x minus 3 over 2 equals 3, or x minus 3 over 2 equals -3. So again, we have our two equations that we need to solve. Now this is just a reminder about clearing fractions. We have fractions here. Here's a denominator. So if we multiply everything by the common denominator, which would be 2, including that 3, sometimes it helps to put a 1 just to remind you that everything needs to be multiplied by 2. So multiply this by 2 and that by 2. So we get x minus 3 equals 6. We're going to add 3 to both sides. So we get x equals 9, and that's one of our answers. And we cannot forget the other one. So again, we're going to multiply both sides by 2. So we get x minus 3 equals -6. So we add 3 to both sides. So we get x equals -3. And both those answers, if we put in here, will get a true statement. So those are equalities. It gets a little more complicated when we do inequalities. We have to worry about whether it's an or and it's an and there's overlapping graphs, just like I talked about in my other video. So that's what we do. We have the castle walls. We put them down. There's a positive answer and a negative answer. One of the mistakes I see people do with absolute value equations is they forget about the negative answer. And they just do one. So you won't get full credit for that. The thing about absolute value is there's two answers. So I'll see you next time.